Welcome to Home as Archive. My name is Katerina and I will be a host and artist this evening. To begin, I would like to acknowledge the First Nations and traditional owners of the land we are broadcasting from. I am currently on Kaurna land where I live and write. I pay my respects to elders past and present, and as this is an online recording whose reach is far, to the elders of the lands this recording might reach. For this event we will be discussing home, spaces and histories. This is part of the wonderful Emerging Writers Festival and is presented in collaboration with Essex Book Festival and Metal Culture, Southend. Tonight we will be witnessing work by artists working between so-called Australia and Essex, England. They will be sharing artefacts from their archives of their personal histories. I anticipate there will be an intimacy tonight as we will be peering into these artists' homes. Where we live and who and what we share those spaces with is intimate and vulnerable. In some ways, the past year has allowed us to peer into each other's homes over Zoom, but in others, it has separated us from sharing space with the people we cherish. I'd love to frame tonight as not only a look into these artists' homes and lives, but the creation of our own archive, capturing this moment through place and objects. So please join me in welcoming the artists featured tonight: Lone Fuse Theatre, M.G. Boulter, Maria Gomides, Stephen Laws, Delaine, Jazz Money, Anne Odeke, Tasnim Sammak, and Adam Thompson. Thank you. To introduce myself more fully, I'm Katerina Bryant. I'm currently sitting in front of my bookshelf, which I love as it is vibrant and colourful. I am wearing a red shirt. I am a writer and PhD student whose work focuses on archives, disability and women. My first book, Histories, came out last year and engages with my own lived experience of mental illness and women's history of illness. I'm currently working on my PhD, which is about the first woman clown in America. My work is connected to archives, and because of this, I'm particularly interested in alternative ideas of what archives can be. So, for example, homes. I'm also very aware of the biases and silences within traditional archives. I think because my work is very archive-based and working from home and living with a chronic illness, very home-based, I found it difficult to decide what I'd share tonight. I thought about the red wattle tree outside my office window, one I only seem to look at when my work is not going well. The distress I've managed to imbue into a living thing that does not care at all about my writing. I thought about my living room, maybe my couch where I've spent so many hours in pain or shattered with my dog resting her chin on my stomach. But to move into that space I felt was too intimate. Moving work from outside this room into another felt like a boundary I was not ready to cross. Funny when so much of my work is deeply personal. So tonight in my office and in front of my bookshelf, I have chosen an item that is always nearby when I work. Yet it is not less meaningful than a tree or a couch. It holds on to history in that way objects do. I'll be talking about a white hand-painted plate. To run my fingers along its surface, I can feel the bumps of the paint and where it switches from matte to gloss. The paint itself is vibrant, red, blue, green, yellow. In the center are two peacocks facing one another. It takes a few minutes of looking to realize they're peacocks by the large plume of feathers coming out of their backs. Their faces and necks look more like a blue swan, their beaks too long and pointed. Their feet are drawn in black and look like upside down pitchforks. The more time I look at the plate, the more I notice how the colours of the paint blur outside the lines, how there are more blue swirls on the top half of the plate's border than the bottom. On the back of the plate, it tells me what I already know. Handmade. It's inscribed with where it was made. Rhodes. Above the writing is a hole that's been drilled with a small piece of faded blue wire looped through. The wire looks like the type you'd find holding together a bread bag. This plate is small and inexpensive, but for me, it's a piece of home. It first belonged to my big yaya, a woman whom I loved deeply. She died when I was young, but I still remember her presence, her height, the way Mum would drive past a giant giraffe statue on the way to her home, how she lived in the suburb I do now. She came to Australia in the last years of her life. I often imagine what that would have been like. We communicated in ways that were uniquely our own. She spoke only Greek, no English. I knew only Sagabo, I love you, and Galanifta, good night. Mum told me this plate hung, with many others, on her kitchen wall. When I said to you it was white, that was half true. It's half white, half ivory. The oil from her kitchen is baked into its lower half. I've wiped it down, but the colour remains. I don't wish to strip this away though, this imprint of her, a small part of the story of where this plate has been. I do not know, but I imagine this plate came with her from Greece. It was made in Rhodes, where my family is from. I've been once as a teenager and remember only a little, the dust and sand melding into one, feeling sweat run down my arms on a bumpy bus ride. The Rhodes I know is more in my family's imagining, the stories Mum tells me about the time she spent there as a teenager, dirt floors and no running water, family lore, Big Yaya's sons, the ones who came to Australia died young, those who stayed in Greece lived into their 80s, 90s. I realise this is a lot for a single plate to hold. It makes me think of visiting an archive, a museum. Small white cards with descriptions printed. All of the history lost when we condense a plate down to a material or date. Thanks for your time tonight.
Marangyaria, Yuandu Jazz, Waradriyana Baladu, Gadagonyarumbangorana. Hello, good evening, welcome to my home. It's on beautiful Gadigal land in the place now known as Sydney. I want to pay my respects to the custodians of this land who have cared for it, protected it, nurtured it, sung it and danced it since the first sunrise. These lands and skies and waters have always been Aboriginal land. This is Gadigal land, and beyond the mountains on the other side is my homelands, full of plains and rivers. I want to acknowledge the Wiradjuri elders who continue to care for me and my kin. Welcome to my home. It's lovely to have you. It's evening time. It's winter now. And so it's a nice time to have coziness. I'm very lucky to live here. Home to me means different things. It's the place I am right now. It's wherever my mum is. And it's also a place that I've never lived, along the Murrumbidgee in southern Wiradjuri country, where my homelands are, where my family have lived since forever. I grew up moving a lot. We were renters, and every year or two the homeowner would decide to sell or move back, or our circumstances would change and off we'd go again. My mama is incredible at setting up a house and transforming it into a home. After just a few days, it would feel like we'd always been there. Everything would be settled and perfect and feel just right. I like to think that I inherited that trait. I still move quite often, every year or so. In fact, I just counted before. I'm 29 and I've lived in 28 houses, which feels like a lot. There was a space in my mid-20s where I think I moved 15 times in less than 5 years. But for me, home has never been the walls and the roof and the location. Home has always been about the people and the contents. The objects that become indispensably precious, the things that when you unpack them, instantly the room feels like it's been with you all along. Objects that are full of memories and meaning. I don't think there's a thing in my home that doesn't have sentiment attached. There's nothing here accidentally. Now I live with my partner in the most grown-up house of my life, I think. And together we're filling it with memories and objects that we bring with us. The things that have led us to this point. And together we're filling this house with memories of our own. As we make a home together, we bring in objects that fill us both with joy. Now we have a dog and this beautiful, safe domestic life that feels really precious. And even though we'll pack up and go, maybe this year, maybe next, who knows, it matters to me that for as long as we're here, it's a safe home. It's a beautiful home, and it's one filled with joy. And hopefully in the future, there will be babies and a house in the bush and a backyard and bird song. But for now, we live in the city, and it is a strange thing, but a beautiful thing in its own way. And I feel very lucky to be here. Thank you. Mandangu, have a beautiful night.
Hi everyone at the Emerging Writers Festival, thanks for having me. I'm Steve Laws, I'm a visual artist, writer and poet from Essex, just east of London in the UK. And this is my piece for the Homer's Archive project. I hope you enjoy it. It's sort of about some research I've been doing into the ancient inhabitants of England and Ireland, and about my dismay at the lack of sources and the problems caused by colonisers of the past, the Romans and the Normans, and how that all links up with my choice since the national lockdowns to live a little bit like a sort of hermit artist, which I've been loving, just sort of reading, writing, drawing, making, and how these things all link together. Anyway, I hope you enjoy it. Thanks. I am from an island where human habitation has lasted for millennia and it now houses 3 nations. The island is littered with abandoned villages and ancient stone circles which are our inheritance. Many gods have occupied it and sacrifices have been made. Look in any lake or stream or bog to find tools from the Iron Age. The rituals of people past remain under our dirt, like stepping on a hidden drain, fingers crossed inside the earth. I'd like to have been an archive of some unwritten ancient scriptures, but these stories were suppressed by Roman imperialism, followed by the destruction of the pagan religions by Christ the Saviour on the cross and the Christian mission. Who knows what they were doing when they erected all those stones and barrows to consecrate the dead 4,000 years ago. The builders of the henges, the beakers and the Celts, they all lived here, died here, left without their voices being felt by us who then succeeded after many thousands of years, passing tales from father to son, from heart to mouth to ear. I'm bitter because the stories I would have liked to have known are gone. Oral traditions vanish when the speakers lose their tongues. Being British is sort of like having a vision but no eyes. Some memories have grown foggy and others been left to die. I'm at odds when I go to Ireland. That's the birthplace of my gran. She's old now, devoutly Christian, and she's severed from her land. She hasn't spoke her language for some 60 odd years. She once said a few words to me, in jest, like a party trick. She used to walk to school without shoes, and lived from mouth to hand, but she never knew what came before, like Tuatha De Danann. She had no knowledge of all the old gods, of Lu, Danu, Cuchulainn, Boann, Manan and Og, Balor, Dagda, Etan. Because our collective cultural memory has been stolen by imperialists, and those who committed this great crime are the same modern day monopolists. The Earls and the Marquesses, assembled in our parliament, who are now part of political parties, are by descent partly French. You know, Astor, Courtenay, Seymour, Chartres, Montagu, Garnier, Colville, Goddard, Renard, Danat, to name a few. These descendants of Norman barons, the ancient aristocrats, they came here to build castles, and now we all live in flats. We've been writing rhymes in the Masonettes since the days of rewinding tape cassettes, but these days we just say it, Alexa plays it, like radio stations will take requests. We've lost our capability of memory of a different kind, because Caesar said the Druids spent 20 years to learn their lines. They'd pass on myth and history from their lips to their communities. They knew the secrets of the nature of truth and life and unity. So I'm miffed when I consider the losses that were made to the cultural richness of the world under the Roman blade. But it's a double-edged sword, because writing brings the possibility of memory stretching into forever and eternity. The monks of Iceland and Ireland wrote down the sagas and the myths, which provide our only glimpse into the tales of Celts and Vikings. Maybe it's having these kids around, or maybe it's the things I've been thinking about, but I've never felt closer to the living ground. I want to learn about where I'm living now, so I've been researching heritage because I think that I could benefit from knowing where the hell it is my relatives find their genesis. And I've always romanticised being a solitary artist, of reading, thinking, singing psalms, and this year I've had the chance to test it with some impunity because the state told me to stay indoors. And I'm not one to disagree with something I might enjoy. I've spent the months just making things and uncovering stones to look, turning the pages of history, and next I'll be binding books. I've honed some skills and made impressions on my brain folds that ain't moved. I was a moody prepubescent, but I've learnt some lessons and improved. Now I'm a teacher, but my sessions are delivered over Zoom. See, I've completed my one mission, make my living from my room. Find me minding my own business, making business out my mind, taking lessons when I get them, reading from the books I buy. I'm the abbot of this cloister. I'm a sole trader. I'm my own employer. I'm not going out unless I'm needed, like I'm a pearl inside an oyster. I'm like the druid, the Brahmin, the shaman. I won't re-enter the village till the drama of the spirit world looks like it's overspilling. I'm sitting between the wisdom of improving where I'm living and going missing with the spirits through the kaleidoscopic prism. I want to be a conduit for fairies, nymph and fae, like Ogham, but in Roman tongue, a glimpse into the Shay. I'm monastic about my time to write and draw illuminations. I spent days set up my desk in silence with my ruminations. I've been sat in my scriptorium, my laptop is my palimpsest. I will be victorious, tapping at my lamplit desk. I've drawn and wrote since I was small and now I'm binding pages. I want my work to resonate with people through the ages, like those I've seen before me on this island I call mine. connecting with me in a place I cannot yet define. Creation is just mimicry of a higher purpose. It's not a choice, more like a curse, turning cursive into verses. That's why I've built this altar next to my bed. You can call it a desk, so my heart can be an archive of all the things I've read, and I can take them from my head and put them onto paper, then litter them around my house and call myself creator. Thank you.
It's jumping out of bed because I forgot to put the bins out the night before. It's the realising, wait, it's only Tuesday and they come on a Wednesday, right? It's the laugh I make out loud because it's okay, now I'm up, I might as well pop to the bakery. It's the stroll to the top of the road, passing the man with the big nose and the woman whose self-tan means she's practically luminous. Yes, but where are you from? It's the, since I've now got time, I could take the longer route home. Past the bougie shops, that restaurant I keep meaning to try, and the one with that dress that I wish I could fit into. It's the, all right, morning, hello, and hey, as I pass people I recognise, but I can't quite put my finger on where. It's the, it's okay, it'll come to me. Was it, I know, in the, no idea. Yes, but where are you from? It's the coffee. My God, do I start to need it. 1 coconut latte double shot, please. £1 million. Bargain. It's the spring in my step as I now stride into the park. It's the graffiti on the park sign as I enter. Tommy is a grass. Poor Tommy. I wonder where he's hiding. It's the broken glass, the empty crisp packets, high heel, just the one. Where's the other? Where's the owner? Yes, but where are you from? It's the synagogue, the mosque, the church. It's that I should connect with my spiritual self more often, you know. It's the Polish food shop, the Caribbean takeaway, the Asian supermarket, the African restaurant. Those dumplings, man, those dumplings. It's the, I'll just quickly pop in for some pickled onions. I saw Nigella using them. I will use them. What? I will. Yeah, but really, where are you from? It's the time. Oh, shit. Wait, what is the time? Quick march. It's the sea. Oh, my days. 10 minutes ain't gonna make a real difference, is it? It's the, look at it. Just look at it. Ain't it beautiful? Grey, I don't care. My sea doesn't need to be blue. It's a deep breath. It's the, I could swim out in that any time I like, but I won't because it's bloody cold and I'm not that crazy. Yeah, that's all well and good, but where do you come from? It's the smell. The smell. Donuts, but not just any donuts. Seafront donuts. The sugar, the cinnamon. It's the arcade lights. The not so eco-friendly because they're on throughout the entire night lights. Vegas it ain't, but what a sight. It's the sleepy theme park waiting for the scores of families and school parties to arrive. The noise. You just wait till you hear the noise. Yes, but could you please tell us where you're from? It's the taxis, the buses, the lorries, the coaches. It's the gaggles of elderly ladies waiting for the driver to pick them up for their day trip. It's their joking and laughing. They're checking and double checking they've got everything they need. Pills, purse, phone, check. It's the, I hope I'm like that when I'm older. Yes, I understand, but could you tell us where you're from? It's the, if I take this turning, then I can pass that house. The one I'll never be able to afford, but a girl can dream, right? It's the, maybe this shortcut wasn't a good idea. You think you know a place, right? It's the stepping over cracked pavements, drains and dog mess. Why can't people tidy up after their pets, right? It's the, there it is. Home sweet home. I'm running a bit late, but you're not going to fire me, right? Right? Where do you come from? It's home, my home. I don't need to explain it to anyone else. It's what makes me me, even if you can't understand it. It's the look I give you to politely hint that maybe you're looking for the word heritage. It's me trying to educate, you saying you're willing to listen. It's the position we both find ourselves in. It's awkward, but it'll pass. We'll be in touch.
Hi everyone, salam and marhaba. I'm grateful for the opportunity to participate in this year's Emerging Writers Festival, and especially for our session's theme of Homer's Archive that is so closely linked to ideas of remembrance, counter-memory, and storytelling that I work with in my research and writing. I come to my topic not as a universal human subject, speaking about an abstract, disembodied experience of home, with all its modern capitalist connotations of investment, property, middle class status, and nuclear family. Instead, with events in Palestine very present to me as I write and present this piece, and we bury over 250 of our people defending the homeland, Home as Archive cannot but bring up embodied Palestinian poetics for me that are of life worlds I have inherited. I'm thankful for the invitation to contemplate Home as Archive together with fellow writers and artists working from the Australian colony, where home is certainly invaded and stolen. Home is a site of memory making, archival work, and with that, Home as Archive or variations of it, such as Home is an Archive, Home is a denied archive, Home is a living archive, each holds its truth. The iron rusty key, for example, is a symbol of Palestinian dispossession, the theft of our homeland so deeply marked by the stealing of our houses that were and are our homes, our grandparents' homes. In 1948, when Israeli terror in the form of massacres was employed as a strategy of ethnic cleansing, over 700,000 of my people left their villages and cities with very few belongings, with the perception that this terror would end and they would walk back to the homes they left. There was no permanent colonial temporality in their minds. More than 500 villages were emptied using this strategy, where at the point of the gun and with the sight of the blood and bodies of family members on the pavement of homes, their homes, our grandparents had to leave worlds behind, not knowing they could never go back. Settlers moved into their homes. My dad's family is from a village near the city of Jaffa, what Israelis have termed as Tel Aviv. I remember my grandfather saying he once, many years ago, had the chance to cross the border into Palestine, but as he came close to his father's home, he stopped. He couldn't come near or see the barbarism of what happened taking its course. He couldn't bear the sight of a settler living life, chilling, content, and prospering inside the house his father built with his own hands. I think of his agony, may Allah have mercy upon him, when I consider Home as Archive. Distance from the course of history helps sometimes, as it seemed to have helped him in this instance. The house key, of course, is not merely a symbol of remembering a family past or tracing ancestry, as is a common impulse within today's eugenesis, DNA tracing, and construction of whiteness as humanity's singular story. Our inherited rusted keys hold the truth of a contested history, make a material claim to a history that can be assessed by placing this key we carry into the door of a settler's home. The key penetrates fallacies and unhinges neatly told truths that grant the settler his belonging to a home that isn't his. It's always incredible to me how settlers move into our humble houses as they are, how very hardcore that they do not seek to shy from the theft of their theft. We were raised with not only existence as resistance, but very much also remembrance as resistance. For as long as I can remember, I have known that dominant knowledge does not totalize. As a Palestinian born in Amman, Jordan, who migrated to Aotearoa, New Zealand, as a child before coming here. In the milk bars I walked to with my cousins in the alleyways of our urban refugee camp hung maps of the region, but instead of Israel, they marked the historic land of Palestine. The stores there were Palestinian owned, packed side by side across now cement homes, which used to be tin, which prior to that were tents after decades of waiting a few kilometers from home for the right to return. Where the camp streets labeled by the administering Jordanian government and the United Nations hold numbers even today, Street 2, Street 7, Street 32, rather than names, whereas stores mostly hold the names Jerusalem Boutique, Bethlehem Bakery, and Java Jewelry, with Palestinian flags flying across the front and a cheap golden frame of the occupied Al-Aqsa Mosque hanging behind the cashier. Israeli narratives were displaced here in this home outside of home, in this urban refugee camp, in this archive that writes us back into history. Israeli narratives held no truth as far as we were concerned, even as governments in the West recognized Israeli sovereignty and peace agreements negotiated over which parts of Palestinian land to give away. Palestinian sensibilities did not surrender to the Israeli archive. As Linda Tabba and Chandni Desai write, Palestinian memory also plays a significant role in rupturing the colonizer's ideology and the material edifice of the settler colonial project. More importantly, in the midst of this continued dismemberment, memory mends, repairs, and keeps alive relations to place and enables a continuity of history, culture, and future. Palestine is not for sale, is what the First Intifada said after the failures of peace negotiations. Jerusalem is not for sale, is what we protest in our present as Trump moved the US embassy to Jerusalem while pressuring us to accept his very Trump-like deal of the century. And as the neighborhoods of Silwan and Sheikh Jarrah spark a unified uprising today. Yaqub, the Israeli settler from New York, tells us how little the Palestinian archive weighs, rationalizing so casually his immorality with the banality of a colonizer who knows he has the power to enact his fantasy. If I don't steal it, somebody else is going to steal it. And so Yaqub enters our archive and our representations of home while squatting, as 23-year-old Muhammad al-Kurd put it, squatting in the home of the al-Kurds who have to share a house with him until Allah grants relief. And I can talk about Yaqub for days. There are a few verses that come to mind here, though, that I would like to end with, from a poem by the famous Arabic poet Samih al-Qasim, who captures Palestinian poetics like no other. The poem is an early work that most Palestinians recognize, titled, "I Tell the World, I Tell It." As one of the first and largest post-World War II refugee nations, Palestinians have been telling, crafting an archive of home wherever we are, for liberation, for refugee rights, and for return and for truth.
أحكي
These verses were changed into lyrics by Reem al-Banna. May Allah have mercy upon her. And what I want to end with is just a sentiment that I believe in, which is basically that no one can steal a home that becomes an archive. Thank you.
This is an opening into a longer work that Home as Archive has been the catalyst for. These minutes will be a taste of the invitation which you have the choice to accept or decline. There is some swearing and language that may feel uncomfortable. I've given the warning, so please don't complain, and if you want more, you now know where to find me. It begins, I am me, known as Delaine Labar. That's Delaine Labar, capital D, small e, L-A-I-N-E, open brackets, Elaine with a small e, with a capital D on the front of it, close brackets, then capital L, small e, space, capital B, small A-N-S, with the S being silent, Labar. Born in Worthing, that's with an A-R, not O-R, which is really how it's spelt. 17th of the 7th, 1965, open brackets, note to self, read numbers as words, not numbers, close brackets, 17071965. I'm an artist. My family are gypsies. Gypsy, that's capital G-Y-P-S-Y, not Gyppo, G-Y-P-O, or Pikey, P-Y-K-E-Y, not some construct. And yes, it's spelt with a capital G. There will be reference to this later. It sounds like you come from the East End, whatever. LA is not far, as we like to call it here. Little Hampton with a capital A and a dropped H, or open brackets, Hampton, capital H, small A-M-P-T-O-N, or Ampton, capital A, small M-P dash, small T-O-N, as this spell check keeps trying to tell me, close brackets. Are you really there on Insta, open brackets, knits, capital N, small I-T-S, Insta, capital I, small N-S-T-A, intra, capital I, small N-T-R-A, inst, capital I, small N-T-S, or inst, a capital I, N, small N-S-T, space, close brackets. Are the other options? Is that the question asked? Question mark. Drop in letters and pronunciation, words that merge, who are not confined by the place that says they come from. I'm a South Coaster by birth. My archive is me. Like wiggly lines, to quote Watts. Open quotation marks. You are not real, end quotation marks, to quote Sun Ra. Travelling, virtually real and unreal, space, time, November 2006, 112006 is when it started, and I returned 18th of November 2019, 18112009. Do I use 1 or 0? Use of language or misuse? When I could return between lockdowns, all in capitals, I rested amongst the fabrics like a giant moth, cocooned in their richness, caressed by their colours, threads like veins and arteries feeding me, landscapes of fibres embroidered, stitched and printed, hand and machined, dressed like a Morcan, open brackets, old Sussex dialect, close brackets, or a moon man, open quotations. The women are ridiculously attired themselves, and in brackets like one that plays, dash it, is trying to change old English plays to new plays. The rogue on stage, close brackets, wear, again trying to change old English spelling, rags patched and filthy and mantles uppermost, when the undergarments are handsome, again trying to change old English spelling to handsome, H-A-N-D-S-O-M-E, or handsomes, H-A-N-S-O-M-S, handsomes, or handsome, H-A-N-S-O-M, and in fashion, close quotations, Thomas Dekker, Langhorne and Candlelight, Chapter 8, 1608, The Wind on the Heath, a gypsy anthology chosen by John Sampson, Chatto and Windus, 1930. Is that me, or am I, open quotation marks, head of a gypsy, close quotation marks, by Augustus John, the colour plate at the beginning of the book. But this head of a gypsy breathes, speaks, writes, paints, is not a specimen, subject, untitled, unnamed. My skin is mine, my eyes are the colour they are meant to be, not bound by dust-covered manuscripts. My history is mine, written, painted, drawn, written from my own archive, a year lost but not lost, documented in written word, drawn lines, painted pages, odd bits of film footage, photos and remembered, sometimes through music, kept in a set of books, folders and pastel coloured paper files. I'm old school with a K, which I just tried to change to stool. Maybe it wants that to be wooden or soft like shit. You see, just like that, I don't trust the digital. Too many glitches. Things get lost. Whole bits of your life like stored on a cloud that you can't see, can't access when you need to, or at some point they will want to sell it back to you after they searched through and sifted like Orwellian mine trawlers, erased or partly existing as a series of lines in bright colours, half missing images and empty files, corrupted and lost forever, just the memory in your own mind, left to remember as only you can because it's gone, no physical tangibility. These books are a history of a forced institutional home archive, transplanted into different space from Sunday the 15th of March 2020, 0715032020, approximately 15 FIFTEEN 15 miles along the coast in Hove. Is that Hove actually? Question mark. Archives use numbers, systems, written words abound, books and documents wrapped, bound by ribbons and elastic bands, contained in boxes with lids, filing cabinets, temperature-controlled storage systems, and we are there, but not there, visible yet invisible at the same time, demonised just because of who you are, documented and held in history. 9th of February 2021, Essex Archives Online, capital T /capital A 408/8/89. Calendar of Essex Assizes file. Open bracket, capital A, capital S, 35//55/1, close bracket. Chelmsford, 15th of March, 1613. Joan Arundel and Mary Lacey committed by Though Harris for being gypsies, open bracket. Gypsies spelled all lowercase, close brackets. Mine sprawls in folders and scavenge boxes piled high in textiles, objects, variable correspondences, empty perfume bottles, nail varnishes, clothes stacked forming sculptures of a kind, hanging from picture rails like skeletal figures, shoes breeding under the bed, some lost to fires to stop evictions, shown in Tate in silence with a blue face and a handmade silk dress trimmed with silver, now in some vegetable boxes, fabric and recycled laundry bags. Small amounts that I could transport with me with some art materials, which start quotation marks are weapons, to quote my late husband. And maybe I am an expert with these.
Hello, my name is MG Boulter, and I am a songwriter, lyricist and musician living in the town of Leigh-on-Sea on the north bank of the River Thames here in Essex in the United Kingdom. It's a great privilege to be part of the Emerging Writers Festival, especially alongside so many fantastic writers, and I hope you're enjoying the festival so far. I'm sitting in my flat, which is where I've spent the majority of my time this past year following the outbreak of COVID-19. And it's an item in my flat that was the inspiration for the piece that I'm going to read for you now. This is my oak apple. It forms when a gull wasp injects its larvae into a developing flower bud on the branch of an oak tree. The larvae secretions, as they hungrily feed on the bud from the inside, make the hard shell. This particular oak apple sits on a windowsill in the back room of my flat, alongside a piece of the Berlin Wall my grandfather was given by a German colleague in the late 80s, and a small soapstone statue of the Egyptian pharaoh Akhenaten, which I bought in the crypt gift shop of Kelvin Grove Museum in Glasgow, when whiling away a summer afternoon in the city some years ago. During the lockdown of early 2020, this oak apple caught my gaze every day as I sat at my desk, desperately writing lyrics, text, anything to show to this topsy-turvy world that I could still be productive despite its best efforts to confine me to my rooms. The oak apple is small and shiny, like a musket ball you might dig up in some unremarkable field in the Midlands, where men once died for ideas you can't quite grasp today. I recall the summer's day I came across this oak apple. I was 13 and on a picnic with my mother. A horse softly rubbed against a wire fence nearby. A blinded horse, its eyes completely bandaged by a white cloth. We were sitting under an oak tree in the grounds of Hadley Castle, a ruin sitting on high ground overlooking the sweep of the Thames Estuary, the Nore and the Sea Reach, where any ship heading east along its strait is not far from the English Channel and the rest of the world. I can't remember much more of that day, other than I was happy enough to want to memorise it, capture its essence through artefact, something ephemeral to remember an ephemeral day by. The oak apple lodged in the dusty dry earth amongst the exposed roots of the tree fitted nicely. It sat quiet in my coat pocket throughout the next 20 years of my life before being brought to the light of day again when I moved to this flat and placed it on the windowsill, the finer points of the memory lost except for the blinded horse and the happiness. I still visit Hadley Castle, where the wasps made this oak apple all those years ago. The castle was once the pride of Hubert de Burgh, justiciar for Henry III, passing through a bureau of Geneva's hands when Hubert momentarily fell from favour and ending up, centuries later, as a gift from Henry VIII to his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. A stag's skull was found buried near one of the hearths in Victorian times. John Constable sketched, then painted the remaining rounded tower in the early 19th century, the original hanging in a room somewhere in Connecticut, a room now darkened and left silent by the pandemic. Hadley Castle is largely ruins now, good for little climbing feet or illicit teenage smokes. A school friend often told me he would go there for devil worships, but I suspect it was more swigging from beer and listening to Metallica on a Sanyo tape machine. He works in IT now. The stones of the once proud towers, save for one, have fallen along with the land towards the river. The stonework reappropriated by locals of times past for new buildings. The immediate area a palimpsest made from stone. That remaining tower of Hadley Castle looks out onto a stretch of the Thames Estuary, where the 17th century ship, the London, lies sleeping under a constant tide. Sunk during an accidental explosion in 1665, its pinnacle of service was escorting King Charles II back into London from exile in 1660. King Charles's restoration to the throne was commemorated on the 29th of May and was known as Oak Apple Day, on account of him evading a parliamentary army in Shropshire during his escape by concealing himself high above the heads of the soldiers in an oak tree. I think my 13-year-old self would be amazed that this little oak apple survived my teens and 20s, kept me company through salad days, drought years, the golden epochs of summer months and Christmas cheer. This oak apple serves more to me now than it did then. It is not just a simple reminder of a happy day with my mum, but now, entering my 4th decade, it reminds me that we ourselves are ephemeral. We are merely here a moment and then gone. But this is not a sad lesson. Perhaps we should think of it more as a cycle of things discovered, lost, and discovered again. King Charles in his oak apple tree, escorted by a ship now drowned off the coast of Essex, overlooked by a castle where I discovered my own oak apple. Discovered, lost, discovered again.
Hi, I'm Michelle and I'm originally from Rochford in Essex.
Hi, I'm Eleanor and I'm originally from Thurrock in Essex.
We are both the co-founders and artistic directors of Blown Fuse Theatre.
It's a multidisciplinary theatre company creating new performance possibilities by exploring the combination of storytelling, theatre and technology.
We also really like to work with the community during our theatre making process. So we often take whatever subject matter that we are exploring and we run workshops with the community to get like real life experiences and stories. And then we use all of that material going into our creative process.
This is our response to Home as Archive. We hope you enjoy.
January 1st of every year starts with a brisk walk along the seafront. The children run around to keep warm, having competitions for who can collect the most shells. The adults desperate to join in with stone skimming, because beach games have no age limit. Birthday walks in February, surprised by the appearance of the sun, glistening down on the gentle waves as the frost in the air bites at my skin. The sun peers through the clouds to slowly melt the snowy paths as we cling to one another, determined not to slip. The tide is nowhere to be seen. Clouds look like smoke pumping above the sand. How can they appear so crisp and white against the bright blue sky? I meander through the soggy sand and pebbles as the damp air wakes me up. Everything is slow and quiet. Early mornings along the estuary before the world awakes. Long evening chats with friends from Chalkwell to Southend and back again, covering every detail with every footstep. Talks of heartbreak, loneliness and struggles. Problems are equally as talked out as they are walked out. The waves and sunset onlooking as an extra comfort. And as the sun begins to set, our worries are put to rest. Dreamy blue skies merge into the bright blue water. It's not clear where one ends and the other begins. Beach huts lined up, overlooking swimmers and paddleboarders, enjoying the waves as the Southend sun beats down on them. Not a cloud in sight. The sun stands high in the sky, and I strain my neck as I look to see. Families pitch up on the sand, with children building sandcastles. I can see Southend Pier and the roller coasters in motion at Adventure Island. The crowds disperse as the day comes to an end. Sun still beaming, shops begin to close down. Bins overflow with rubbish and wrappers blow in the soft breeze. The aftermath. A warm summer evening, and I walk further along the estuary and take a seat on the sea wall. Gentle waves caress the wall at my feet as I watch the orange sun begin to hide away in the distance. A change of pace after a busy working day. We stroll hand in hand along the seafront. Dark blue skies and a calm reflection. No movement from the water. Everything is still. Time to reflect on the day's events. We stop, take in the sunset, listen to the soft waves, and let the sea air beat against our faces. And breathe. We turn back, no longer need to chat. We just walk as the sun sets on yet another day, and the sea air always promises a good night's sleep.
The Thames Estuary snakes through the east, from the Channel all the way to London. A jagged tear in a paper map. Foam kisses the shore in 1,000 bubbles that fade as quickly as they appear. The silt is charcoal and glitters in the setting sun, the tide retreating back to the horizon as if apologising. We used to think that we could see France from the shore, when really it was just Kent across the river. Everything seemed so much bigger then, through eyes the same size they are now, but in bodies much smaller. When you are born, your eyes are the same size they will always be, a pair to see you throughout life. Your feet, Well, those are a different story. They stretch out, toes spreading, outgrowing countless pairs of shoes. In our journey through life, our shoes are our vessels, taking us through our stories one step at a time. Like hollowed footprints in wet sand, our shoes carry us into our tomorrows, and just as easily as they drive us forward, they lead us back home again. I entered the earth thrust into a concrete utopia, where looming grey buildings pump out smoke from chimneys taller than cranes. The factories made laundry detergent and dish soap, so the air permanently smelt like a mixture of motor oil and suds. Industry lives there. Lorries clattered by and rattled the house so that the glasses in the sideboard clinked for a few split seconds. Amidst the tolling of machinery, the swinging roar of cranes and the foghorn of a container ship, if you closed your eyes and really listened, you could hear the waves. We had gravel in the back garden. There was not enough time to maintain and manicure a lawn. In the afternoons, I'd sit with my legs outstretched, grabbing at fistfuls of stones to make a moat. Every so often in my excavation, I'd find a shell. Pure white with tiny crevices, they were always just too small to hear the sea. I'd collect them in the underside of my sun hat when my pockets were full. A half-deflated paddling pool served as my tide, and I stamped in delight, splashing hose water into the air so high that for a brief moment a rainbow flashed across the blue. At the bottom of this street there's a small school where the corridors smelt like coffee and dog-eared books. In a classroom off the hall, children smeared PVA glue and sprinkled glitter. At break times they'd veer off into the woods where they knew the trees leaked sap. Giggling, they'd smear perfect droplets across the bark with tiny, sticky fingers before wiping their hands on their gingham dresses. On the fields, they'd blow dandelion clocks, cartwheel and skip rope. Simple and unaffected, the seconds turned to minutes, turned to years. Saplings into trees. Scuffed school shoes. Grazed elbows from falling off a skateboard, the smell of vinegar chips and pick-and-mix in paper bags from a corner shop. Costco sheet cakes with fluorescent frosting laying on our fronts on the carpet, heads propped up on our elbows, cutting pictures out of magazines, building dens and making up dances, sticky arms from roll-on body glitter. And the sea. Always the sea. The pumping vein of my childhood. The undercurrent of my now, the whisper of my tomorrow.
Pulingina. My name is Adam Thompson and I'm in Lutruwita, Tasmania. My mob are the Pakana people. I'm an emerging writer. My debut short story collection, Born Into This, was published in February this year by the University of Queensland Press. Right now I am in what we call the top room of my house. It is my writing space. It didn't really occur to me that my home was an archive. I mean, it's full of things I've collected, things that have meaning to me. Many have been shelved, rarely used or looked at over the years. I guess the comfort is in knowing that they are there, safe. But this event has made me consider what is in my home. What are the things I have archived over the years, brought with me as I've moved from location to location, house to house, over and over and over again. When we moved into my childhood home, it felt like it was still occupied. What I mean is, the people who had moved out had left their things behind. Maybe not all of their things, but a lot. I was only young, perhaps 4 or 5. I remember the room that was to become my bedroom. It was dank and dusty. The bedspread, the wallpaper, everything was dull and brown. It was old-fashioned and it had a negative vibe. I sensed that someone had died there, someone who resented the world. But my mum and my grandparents did their best with the renovations. They created a nice bedroom for me. Over time, I accumulated toys and various other curiosities, as children do. Some of the things I had must have been left from the previous owner. There were a few really old, soft toys amongst my possessions that nobody seemed to know the origins of. There was also an accordion, an old accordion, a red one. Well, it seemed old to me. In those days, I just assumed it came with the house. I played with it pretty roughly. It was an accordion after all, and those things take some energy to play. It lived in the bottom of a big plastic toy bin in my room. As I grew a bit older, I didn't give the accordion a lot of attention. New toys came into fashion, out of fashion. Then technology came along, or at least into my world. There was an Atari and then a computer. We didn't have much, but my mum gave me what she could, at least until my brother came along when I was 7 or 8. It was around that time that my grandmother was at the house one day. She came into my room and for some reason the accordion was out. "That was Daryl's accordion," she said. "Who's Daryl?" I asked. "My brother," was all she said. From that point on, I thought of it as Daryl's accordion, so it didn't come with the house after all. But the knowledge that it was Daryl's accordion didn't elevate its status at all. Not then. It still lived in the bottom of the toy bin, and there it stayed. Mum got remarried prior to my brother being born. We moved out of that house when I was in grade 6, so about 1989. In the space of a year, we lived in 3 houses, and I seemed to lose things during each move. And then, of course, high school happened, then college, girlfriends, travel, girlfriends, work. I've lived interstate a few times, but now I'm back in Tasmania, married and with a 7-year-old boy. Now we own our own home. My motivation for buying was quite simply because I was sick of moving house, relocating, and physically moving my stuff around, losing things along the way, losing pieces of myself. I have almost nothing physical left from my childhood. The few things I do have are like little miracles. When we talk of home as archive, it is these things I think of first. They are my prized possessions, but I rarely look at them. They are more alive in my mind, I think, than they are in the physical world. A few weeks ago, my wife found my old doona cover in the top cupboard of our bedroom. It is from the house I grew up in. It is white and Snoopy themed. All the Peanuts gang are on it. It must have cost someone a bit because it is like a hotel sheet. It is thick and smooth and luxurious on the skin, still 40 years after it was made. Perhaps they just made them better back then. I hadn't thought about the doona cover for a while. I went into my son's room and it was on his bed, made up like. I was in shock and in 2 minds. I wanted to protect it, to whip it off the bed and stow it back into the cupboard where I knew it would be safe. But at the same time, it felt special to see my son using it, gripping onto it like I used to, pulling it to himself for comfort. His eyes were closed and his breath was shallow. He was asleep. He wriggled his nose when I brushed a lock of hair from his face. He looked so much like me. I felt like a sook, standing there, tears on my face. I'm glad my wife didn't see me. But there really was no decision to make. Of course, the cover stayed on the bed. If home is archive, then my home is the richest, most valuable archive of all. The accordion now lives in my spare room. It has its own cardboard box. Inside the box, it's wrapped in a flannelette sheet. Of course, as I grew up, I learned more about my Uncle Daryl and the origins of his accordion. See, Daryl died young. He was the last of my great-grandmother's children. The way Grandma tells it, he was sickly, had a hole in his heart. They were a big family, and my grandmother was at least 20 years older than Daryl. She was already married when he came into the world. Daryl was in hospital in Launceston after a heart operation in Melbourne. He was only 12 years old. Grandma would visit him every day, and on these occasions he would ask her to bring him something, a cake without salt because he couldn't eat salt, or a toy or some sweets. The accordion was one of those things, one of the things he wanted. His father, who had died earlier in the year, played many instruments, including an accordion. One night when my grandma visited, Darryl wasn't his usual self. When she asked what he wanted, he said, "Nothing, just a lot of hugs." He died that night in his 13th year. A dear boy, my grandma says when she talks about him, and she cries every time she tells his story. I have a few photos of Darryl, and I have his accordion. I can't believe it stayed with me for all this time, through all the moves. How it even managed to survive the beating I gave it as a child. Of course, now it is safe in my home, my archive. And I understand what it means. I know its story. Now I handle it with care.